Los Angeles, it's the herd. Wherever you may be and however you may be listening. iHeartRadio, Fox Sports Radio, and FS1. By the way, all sorts of stories on quarterbacks and where they're going. The Carson Wentz thing could happen very soon. So at top of next hour, we're going to play quarterback dominoes. There's a report about Deshaun Watson this morning that's got a little teeth to it. There's a Russell Wilson rumor. I don't think has any teeth to it, but we'll play quarterback dominoes in 1 hour from now. And Joy Taylor is joining me. Joy, how are you on a Tuesday?
I'm great. Happy Fat Tuesday. Doesn't have quite the same flair it usually does, but this is my New Orleans trip every year this time of year. So we're in LA right now, but
yeah, I haven't been in New Orleans in years.
Oh my God, it's my favorite place.
Is it? I want to start with this. So I see a lot of stories, and most of the time I think there's credibility. I don't think the media just makes stuff up. Sometimes in the political media, I think people have agendas, but generally in the sports media, there's no reason to be wrong on something. You wouldn't risk your career on being wrong on something. But I do think people get fed information that's sometimes erroneous or misguided. And I got nothing against Mary Kay Cabot. She's great. I've talked about her before on the show for Cleveland. But I don't buy this story for a second. J.J. Watt seriously considering the Browns as one of his options. I don't buy it for a second. There's a lot of information getting fed out there, and I'll tell you why. So there's 7-8 teams that have been mentioned. I'll just mention them to you. Green Bay, Kansas City, Cleveland, Buffalo, Colts, Pittsburgh, Tennessee. They're all, have their pluses and minuses. The two obvious places to go would be Green Bay and Kansas City, not just because of Aaron Rodgers and Mahomes, but these are organizations that win consistently all the time, W's, and compete for playoffs. The second thing to remember with J.J. Watt, he's not going to take a huge salary. So he may have a contract structured where he makes a lot of money based on sacks. He may have some nice bonuses. Well, which teams in the NFL lead more than any other teams in the NFL? Kansas City and Green Bay. Meaning J.J. Watt in the second half is on a defense that is pass rushing an opponent that's trailing. So this makes sense for J.J. Watt. If I was J.J. Watt's agent, you want to play for the Packers, you want to play for the Chiefs. Because nobody's going to, he's an older player, he's been banged up, he's not going to get a huge salary. He can have huge bonus opportunities based on sacks and production. So you want to play for a team that is often in the lead, and you can pin your ears back and go get sacks and hits and hurries and fumbles and all that stuff. But here's why I don't buy Cleveland. Listen, it's funny about the NFL, but for the last 30 years, what I'm about to say has happened every time. But every year I suggest this, people freak out. For the last 30 years, every year, 4 teams that made the playoffs don't. And that means 4 new teams do. I know I'm going to suggest this. Cleveland's not going to make the playoffs. And by the way, pom-pom waivers, I've nailed Cleveland in the last several years. Last year, a lot of doubters, rookie coach. No preseason. I said, no. Cleveland's going to make the playoffs. I don't know if they can win a game, but they're going to make the playoffs. I was right. Year before, oh my God, Freddie Kitchens. I said, grease fire. Won't work. Mess. I was right there, too. In fact, last year I was 7 for 7 on AFC playoff teams. I often wear a robe around Fox Sports that just says AFC King, Uncle Colin. You think of me as the herd. I'm known as AFC King, Uncle Colin. So 4 teams that made the playoffs last year are not going to make the playoffs. And I'm going to give you 2 of them. The Saints, who are in salary cap hell and won't be as good a quarterback, and Cleveland. And that's nothing against Cleveland. But I'll give you 2 numbers that are hard to argue yourself out of. Put the pom-poms down. Cleveland last year had a negative point differential and made the playoffs. Virtually impossible. Virtually impossible. The Washington football team that we all rolled our eyes that made the playoffs had a positive point differential. Cleveland had a negative point differential, meaning they got rolled a lot. And also Cleveland, 8 of Cleveland wins, 8 of their wins came against Drac, teams that were 32, 78, and 1 in the NFL, meaning Cleveland beat a lot of bad teams. They beat a lot of bad teams, and when they faced good teams, they often got whacked, and they had a negative point differential. Cleveland's got no history. J.J. Watt's going to pick a winner. Cleveland's got no history of back-to-back years in success. They haven't made the playoffs back-to-back years since the 80s. I mean, just think about that. That's over 30-some years ago. Secondly, they've never made a real commitment to Baker Mayfield right now, so we don't know what their future is. And third, their schedule is brutal next year. Next year, their road schedule is the Packers, the Chiefs, Pittsburgh, Baltimore, the Patriots. Minnesota's going to bounce back. They're not going to be that bad. And the Chargers with Justin Herbert in year 2. So I don't know who the new 4 teams are going to be in the playoffs, because there are going to be 4 new teams minimum next year in the playoffs. It's the way it's worked 30 straight years. My guess is the Miami rebuild will keep getting better. They had a very good draft. I suspect they'll have another one. Miami will creep in. They got close this year. I suspect the San Francisco 49ers will not have nearly as many injuries. I would guess the 49ers get in. And my 2 teams right now this morning, and I haven't laid it all out yet, but the Saints are not going to be the same team. They're not. Okay, they got cap issues. They got to let guys go. They don't have Drew Brees' leadership. And Cleveland. It was a lot of mirage last year. I was there for it. I thought they'd be a playoff team. They're not going to be a playoff team. And J.J. Watt's not going to an inconsistent franchise. He can cherry pick. He's a free agent. He can cherry pick anybody he wants to go to. He needs to go to Green Bay or Kansas City, not only because you got winning organizations and a history of smart front office moves. The second thing is they lead games at halftime, meaning he can pin his ears back, get more sacks, get more hits, get more interceptions, get more fumbles. That's how his contract is largely going to be structured, my guess today. All right, here's a story that's interesting. So we got a lot of this stuff. This Carson Wentz thing, according to multiple sources who I trust, is going to happen here really quick. So he's out of Philadelphia. He's out. They're done. Whatevs. Whether you like Jalen Hurts or not, doesn't matter. He's gone. They've made a decision. So the Colts and the Bears are believed to be the 2 destinations that he's going to land. So we all know that the Colts are smart, measured, have often dominated their division. We know the Colts would be a good destination for Carson Wentz. But as I said yesterday, the Colts are not desperate. They don't have a big brother in the division they're chasing. Let me talk about a sleeping giant in the NFL, the Chicago Bears. I'm going to show you something, and it's really astounding. Should Carson Wentz be interested in Chicago? So none of you think that Mitch Trubisky is the future anywhere. If I said Mitch Trubisky is your new quarterback, none of you would cheer that, right? Like it's over in Chicago. The last 3 years, I'm going to give you, this is in a windy city with 1 legitimate receiver. They missed Tariq Cohen last year. Last 3 years of Mitch Trubisky's numbers in Chicago. These are better than Baker Mayfield. Now, I don't think Trubisky's as good as Baker Mayfield, but these are Jared Goff, Baker Mayfield numbers. Look at Trubisky's numbers in the last 3 years with Matt Nagy. 25-13, 65% completion percentage, and a 90 passer rating. Also, 57 TDs, 3 picks. What does that tell you? It tells you that Matt Nagy just needs a quarterback. Mitch Trubisky's numbers are not that far off Matt Ryan in the last 3 years. They're not Matt Ryan. They're not that far off. So everybody understands that Carson Wentz is going to want to land in Indianapolis with the Colts. We all get that. Frank Reich, great offensive line. But I look at Chicago and I think to myself, number one, if you're Carson Wentz, Sam Darnold, anybody, Deshaun Watson, you get a great defense. You got the Lions in division. That's 2 wins a year right there. So you got a doormat in your division. You got, and Trubisky, by the way, had played very well against the Vikings also. So you got a doormat in the Lions. You've got an excellent defense. And what's the bar in Chicago? It's not like Carson Wentz would be replacing a legend. They'd move Nick Foles out of town. Nick Foles isn't a cap hit. They'd move him out of town. They'd move Trubisky out of town. Chicago's arguably the great American sports city. It's one of the great cities in America. This kid grew up in the Dakotas. He doesn't care about cold weather. It's probably close to home. I think the Bears are a little bit of a sleeping giant. And I think the Bears should be favored. Trent Dilfer said this yesterday. I think the Bears should be favored to get Carson Wentz, and they would feel like a playoff team if they got him.
I think Chicago has to panic. They have to knee-jerk react to this. They will probably offer more than they need to get Carson Wentz. They're the little brother in the division. They have to make this type of splash hire for two reasons. One, they got to be relevant again, and you said it. They got to save their jobs, and draft picks for Ryan Pace aren't as important because he knows he's got to win right now or he's out the door.
All right, coming up next, I wish I wasn't the only person in the media that had to regularly say this, but there's another Russell Wilson story out today. Where there's smoke, there is fire, and I'll address that coming up next.
Be sure to catch live editions of The Herd weekdays at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific on Fox Sports Radio, FS1, and the iHeartRadio app.
Looking for a new podcast? You do not want to miss Under the Influence. I'm your host, Joe Piazza, and I'm taking you into the depths of the mom internet, a place that preys on some new mothers while also minting millionaires.
Instagram ruined women for a time.
Influencers certainly feel the pressure. How could I have a baby and not share it?
Welcome to Mumstagram. It's not for influencers, it's for under the influences.
Join me to dive down this rabbit hole and find out how the commodification of motherhood is driving a lot of us to the edge of our sanity. Listen to Under the Influence with Joe Piazza on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Good to have you in today. A little energy today. I'm back on my B game. I'm feeling pretty strong. So here's another story I don't buy. It's nothing against the person reporting it. I just don't buy it. That Russell Wilson has his eye on the Cowboys, according to Mike Florio. He was on a Dallas station. He said that maybe he was, ingratiating himself to the host. I don't buy this at all. But I will say this. There's a lot of rumblings with Russell Wilson right now. And Russell Wilson never says anything. I take a week off and he's suddenly Howard Stern. He's controversy at every turn. And Florio says Russell, eye on Dallas. Now, I don't think it's crazy. Dallas is a kind of a star. Jerry Jones likes to create stars. I think Russell Wilson feels sometimes he's jammed up in the Pacific Northwest. But it is funny. The power of likability. It is really funny. So Mike Tomlin has not had a losing season in 14 years. That's pretty remarkable. He gets ripped all the time. Andy Reid dominated the NFC for 5 years. Dominated it. And was good for over 10. They fired him. Belichick dominates the entire league for 20 years. Brady leaves. He's 7-9, and there's critics everywhere. Pete Carroll, crickets. Because he's likable. He's chawing on that gum 100 miles an hour. He's available for interviews. I think Pete's a nice guy. He's a fun guy. He's got big energy. Got big energy, Pete. But does anybody ever go, and I like him, but he was fired twice in the NFL. He left USC and NCAA quicksand. They've never recovered. He was 14-18 before Russell Wilson got to Seattle. His coveted defense his last 4 years have ranked 11th, 16th, 26th, and 22nd. He now has incredible power in personnel. In fact, that's why the GM, John Snyder, almost left to take the Lions GM job. And their draft picks have been all over the map. That Jamal Adams trade, there's no safety in the NFL worth 2 first-round picks. Pete made that happen. The Rashad Penny first-round pick was a mess. It was a draft loaded with running backs. You could have gotten Rashad Penny in the second, third round. He's never played. There's a Doc Rivers quality here. And I like Doc and I like Pete. But Doc Rivers got fired. Doc Rivers has a presence. Like Pete, he had an early title. He'd been fired a few times. But there's a likability. There's a presence. But Doc Rivers ultimately paid the price last year because the Clippers underachieved. And you tell me, since they won the Super Bowl, doesn't it feel kind of like Seattle is making crap up as they go? Kind of? I mean, in 2018, they lead the NFL in rushing. Lead the NFL. 2019, they're like 19th. Just stop running the ball. Jamal Adams trade. Offensive line always feels suboptimal. Even in Los Angeles, if you mention Pete, if you criticize him, people don't like it. There's just, Seattle feels like something is off. We rip Tomlin. We rip Belichick. We ripped Andy Reid. We criticize everybody. Has anybody ever said that franchise up in Seattle feels lopsided? Pete controls personnel. Pete controls the defense. Pete controls the offensive line. The offense looks prehistoric. Just a little pushback? A little? I'm not asking for dismissals and firings, but it is interesting. There is this Pacific Northwest shield around Pete, and the downside to having all that power, and outside of Belichick, nobody in the NFL has more power than Pete Carroll. Andy Reid does not have this much power. Brett Veach runs personnel. Sean Payton does not have this much say. Mickey Loomis and Jeff Ireland run personnel. Pete and Belichick run their franchises. By the way, neither has been great on draft day the last 4 or 5 years. Just saying. Joy with the news.
No. Turn on the news. This is the Herd Line News.
Well, the Lakers are expected to be without Anthony Davis until at least the All-Star break in March. He was diagnosed with a calf strain, but the MRI revealed no rupture of the Achilles tendon, which is obviously great news.
That's great.
He'll be reevaluated in 2 to 3 weeks, and the team reportedly plans to be conservative on a timeline for his return. He's averaging 22.5 points per game, 8.4 rebounds per game, 3 assists per game, and 53.3 field goal percentage this year. Obviously, having Anthony Davis around is a huge bonus for the Lakers, but this isn't terribly surprising considering Anthony Davis's very long and storied injury history.
Yeah.
But obviously, the main concern was that Achilles. Anytime you say Achilles, it's full panic mode because we know how long that recovery process is compared to many other injuries. But I do think that this was kind of inevitable when it comes to the Lakers. There was going to be somebody who came out of the bubble that was going to deal with an injury at some point early this season.
Yeah.
Every other team that was in the bubble late has dealt with injuries. Obviously, the Heat have been decimated by injuries.
Yeah.
The Nuggets, the Celtics, this was kind of expected. And then obviously Anthony Davis does have a long history of injuries. I don't think this is anything to worry about right now, but I do think that the Lakers should be extremely conservative with Anthony Davis because they don't have some of the issues that some younger teams have or teams that haven't just won a championship have with chemistry. We obviously know that Anthony Davis and LeBron are comfortable. This isn't a huge deal. The bigger concern to me is how many minutes LeBron is already playing and how many minutes he's going to have to keep playing. But home court advantage isn't going to be that big of a deal in the playoffs. I'm assuming that we're not. Obviously, we don't know. God willing, we all have fans fill the stadium soon. But conservatively speaking, I'm not assuming that's going to happen for the playoffs. So, having home court advantage isn't the same as it is in years past. So, I'm not concerned about it. You want everybody, all your stars healthy going into the playoffs. So just be conservative as you can with Anthony Davis during the season.
And to me, the Lakers' chemistry has already been good this year. So unlike the Clippers last year, who had some injuries and rested guys, they never had a cohesiveness, and that ultimately was their undoing in the playoffs. As long as you've got chemistry formed, if Anthony Davis didn't show up for 2 months, we know the thing about Anthony Davis and LeBron, which was kind of shocking, is how seamlessly their games worked the first week they were together. So for me, as long as chemistry is not an issue, and with the Lakers, even Schroeder, it's not. It all works. Everybody falls in line behind LeBron and AD. So if chemistry is not an issue, you don't have to build that with new pieces. Who cares? Rest him, bring him back in 6 weeks. And to your point, home court advantage means almost nothing. Really?
It doesn't. And the Lakers are 10-4 without AD since he joined the team, and 4-1 without him this season. So they know how to make it work. So with the NBA trade deadline approaching in late March, the Cavs have decided to sit Andre Drummond while they look for a trade partner. And the Pistons are doing the same thing with Blake Griffin. And that's not sitting well with Draymond Green, who sounded off about the trend last night.
To watch Andre Drummond before the game sit on the sideline, then go to the back, and then come out in street clothes because a team is going to trade him is bull. because when James Harden asked for a trade, he was castrated for wanting to go to a different team. At some point, as players, we need to be treated with the same respect and have the same rights that the team can have. Because as a player, you're the worst person in the world when you want a different situation. But a team can say they're trading you, and that man is to stay in shape. He is to stay professional, and if not, his career is on the line.
Yeah, I don't disagree with any of that. That's the reality. The NBA's been doing that for years.
I don't disagree with it, but and that's why I'm very pro-player and very anti-loyalty to organizations, because at the end of the day, this is what happens, and it is their profession. But the key word there is profession. The reason why these teams aren't playing these guys is because they want to keep their trade value up. They don't want to risk them getting injured.
Right.
But there's an expectation of professionalism from both sides. I didn't like how James Harden handled the situation. If he wants out of Houston, fine. But don't go out partying during COVID.
Right.
Don't show up late or skip practices. Don't be disrespectful to the rest of the team. There's an expectation of professionalism.
Yeah.
Asking to leave an organization is one thing. That doesn't mean that you're not a professional. It just means that the situation is not working for you. And people break contracts all the time. But there is an employee, there is an organization, there are contracts, there is a structure to all of this. So yes, like this is how the teams handle things.
Yeah.
That's why you shouldn't be loyal to teams. That's why this like, not to put Bradley Beal in this, but like loyalty to an organization does not make sense to me. Do what's best for you, do what's best for your career. But at the end of the day, the expectation of professionalism should always remain. This is what you do for a living. You handle things like James Harden, of course people are going to be upset with you. That wasn't a professional way of doing things.
Yeah.
He could have asked for a trade and then say I'm not going to participate in practice until I'm traded because I don't want to get injured or whatever. But there's a way to handle things. I agree with everything Draymond's saying, but there's a way to go about things where you don't leave a sour taste in everyone's mouth. So Tom Brady's 7th Super Bowl win was the exclamation point on an incredible first season away from New England. During an appearance on Inside the NFL on Showtime, Bruce Arians said he believes Brady made the move to Tampa because he wanted to prove he could win without Belichick.
His competitive spirit is so strong that he wanted to do it. He wanted to show people. I've never said anything bad about Bill Belichick. I know everybody tries to say I do because his record speaks for itself. He is probably the greatest one ever. But I think he wanted to try a different way.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong. By the way, it worked, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's okay being part of a system. We see this all the time in corporate America, where people are part of a corporation, they're an executive, they do well, and at some point they get kind of turned off by the pressure from the corporation. They go out and they form their own business. And Brady's like, all right, I kind of want to be more of a free spirit. I want to kind of do things. I want to have a say in personnel. And by the way, as somebody pointed out yesterday on our show, Leonard Fournette scored in the Super Bowl, Antonio Brown scored in the Super Bowl, and Gronk scored in the Super Bowl. Those were all 3 Brady guys. So, he wanted all those guys, and they all scored. So maybe Tom's got a little sense of personnel that works too.
Well, we had these conversations about who was more responsible for the New England dynasty for years before Brady even left. Was it Bill? Was it Brady? What percentage do you give Bill because he handles the roster? What percentage do you give Brady because he's on the field? I still don't know that we'll ever really have the answer of who was more responsible, but we know that Brady was the one who got it done at the end of the day because he's validated in what he did in Tampa.
Yeah.
He is the engine that makes all of that go. Belichick may have put together the structure and established the culture and set up the way that all of it was going to work, but Brady was the engine that made it go. And I don't know whether credit really matters when it comes to the New England dynasty, because I don't think we're ever going to see anything like that again in the history of the NFL. It was just too much and too perfect, and too many things had to go the way that it did for it to end up that way.
Yeah.
But I get excited because I'm like, man, I can't wait until the documentaries come out and the books come out and we get all the behind the scenes juicy stuff, because it's so fun. Well, this Tampa Bay Super Bowl has just been amazing. Yeah,
Florida's had a history of this. The Heat, the Marlins, and now maybe the Buccaneers, where no state tax, weather is warm. A lot of these leagues are in the deep fall in the winter. It is easy to talk players to come down to a Florida team. Say, come on down in the warm weather. We're winning. We're good. This puppy won't last forever. But for 2 or 3 years, you can be part of something special. It feels like Florida organizations are not always brilliantly run, but they're very attractive as you age as a professional athlete. Your bones get a little sore, the weather's good, the humidity's good, the state tax is nothing, your family's got a ton to do when you're at practice. So it feels like the Bucks. I saw a story yesterday, Tom's out there saying, come on down and join us. I can see where guys are totally looking for one-offs and one-year deals in Tampa. That's Joy Taylor with the news.
Well, that's the news.
And thanks for stopping by.
The Herd Lie News.
All right, it's good to be back. This is my second day back from a little bit of a medical scare last week. I'm fine. It's all good. A little pain. I'm built for it. My buddy Ryen Russillo, he's got a great podcast at The Ringer, brought to you by Mercedes-Benz, the best or nothing. Yeah, Russillo and I used to hang out, but apparently I'm a physical liability now. You gotta have a doctor on dial when you go out with me, Russillo. So how are things in your life? How are you doing?
I'm good. I was telling you, if you're going to dip your toes into the PEDs, you just had to, because I know you're trying to keep this appearance up, so I'm worried about you, big guy.
I'm doing okay. So it's funny, I take a week off with Russell Wilson, and suddenly he's Mr. Controversy. And my gut feeling on this, Ryan, is when guys who don't talk suddenly talk, there's something, right? Like, this is not just an off-season story. I just saw a story by Florio today. That's like the 5th story I've seen in 3 days. Somebody's talking in this camp, right?
Okay, so if we back up a few years, I remember back when we were working together all the time and we would talk about different guys. Like, I think Russell Wilson is one of the 5 best quarterbacks in the league. I argue for his cause all the time, but he's arguably the single worst interview in sports today. All right? And if you go back and look at any time he's ever done anything, he is in a rush to go off the checklist of, man, that old line, and man, the running backs are terrific, and DK and these guys, and Tyler, they're making plays, and the coaching staff got us ready. And it's like this like repetitive spoken word deal where you're like, okay, we got it. You want to seem like you're the guy checking off all the boxes so that you're giving everybody else a compliment. And that's his routine, and that's the way he wants to present himself. I find it very scripted and honestly incredibly boring, but that tells me that him leaking or leaning towards anything where there's maybe maybe I'm not going to be here, or maybe I am available in trade, is so much more for him than it would be anyone else. So I don't know if he's ever going to leave, but I thought that was a tactful commentary by him because he's never done anything like that before.
Yeah. So there's a couple of, it's the NBA has always been the transactional league. I would argue the playoffs are my favorite thing. The transactions are my second favorite thing. In regular season, I was often third. And I don't feel that with football because I still love the television product. But it is becoming more of a transactional league. And we've already seen Stafford and Goff, and we got Deshaun coming up. The J.J. Watt is interesting to me. I think we would both agree Wisconsin, Green Bay kind of feels like a fit. There's a story out today in Cleveland. So, by the way, J.J. loves these stories out because he's an aging player. He's expensive. Is there a fit for JJ that works? Is there a rumor you buy, a rumor you don't? What is your gut feeling going forward next 2 or 3 years with JJ Watt?
I'd imagine he wants to go somewhere where he has a chance to win above anything else. The Green Bay thing, I think we can make it a little bit more complicated than he went to Wisconsin, so of course he's going to want to be a Packer. I think, as far as like looking at cap sheets and all that kind of stuff, you can figure out a transaction, especially for somebody at JJ at this point. I thought he played well last year. I really did.
Yeah, he did.
I feel like he was so dominant for so many years, and we know what happens with any player. When you don't look like that version of yourself, you're only being compared to yourself. I thought he was a terrific player last year. Maybe terrific's a little high, but I felt like he was actually impacting the pocket and a guy that you would want on your team. And considering, people can make fun of him, but we at least know he cares and he wants to win. And I can't imagine that he's going to go to any of these rumors where it's a team that doesn't have a really good chance of coming out of their conference. I don't buy it.
Yeah. So let me throw we know Carson Wentz is leaving Philadelphia. You're the GM, and you and I do this if we have beers, that it's fun. If we weren't doing what we were doing, I think we'd love to run teams. I would love to be a GM someday.
I'd love to trade with you.
Yes.
I'd love to be the GM. Be like, hey.
Russillo.
This guy would be great. The Rust Belt culture.
So Wentz is interesting because there's a lot of psychology here. Chicago would have to get rid of Nick Foles. Just get him out of town before he shows up with a U-Haul van. The Colts obviously feel right. But you would have to, as a general manager, you would have to buy Ryan. You can correct him, because it ain't right now. It's not good. Are you a buyer for second chance Carson Wentz today if you ran a team?
I am. And I'll tell you why. Look, it was ugly. It was ugly this year. But going back 2 years ago to carry those numbers over, I mean, he was throwing to guys that were playing quarterback in college, street free agents, and you still felt like they had a bit of a chance. So I don't know what happened this past year. I don't know if he's the bad guy. Maybe they're all the bad guy. You know, I don't know who's complicit in this entire story. But I do know this. If you've talked to anyone that has run a team or coached an NFL team, and if they don't have a solution at quarterback, there's so much more value in a guy that's had the good runs like Carson Wentz has had. And the other thing I think we've all learned about Wentz, like when you have Dilfer on, or I have him on, or any of these guys that ever play that position, they are so enamored with Wentz's physical abilities that maybe sometimes it overshadowed some of the decision making, because they'd always be like, that throw right there, nobody else can make that throw. Carson Wentz is the only guy. And you'd be like, really? He's the only guy? Like, all right, maybe three guys, but those are those throws. So that's why so many former players love this guy so much. But the former GMs and coaches, whenever they're looking at their checklist of guys that they can find that are out there, the fact that he even has a 2017 on his resume makes him more appealing. And so I think the social media aspect of this, the news part of it, Colin, all the talk shows, they're so anti-Wentz that I feel like I'm a buyer just going in the opposite direction of people acting like he's incapable of ever doing the job again. And that seems pretty extreme.
Yeah. Deshaun Watson's interesting. We all know he's good. Listen, Houston says they don't want to move off him. I think the Carolina stuff makes sense. You could give him Bridgewater, McCaffrey, 3 or 4 first-round picks. You know, you're never going to get equal value, but I do think Carolina's got some receivers. I like Matt Rule. I think Deshaun in that division. Breeze is leaving, Brady's old, and Matt Ryan's past his peak. The Carolina stuff feels kind of right. Is there a move for Deshaun that works for you?
He'd have to, he's got to be in a situation where he likes the coach for like the first time ever in his career, because it never happened with Bill O'Brien. This stuff had been going on for a while, and now he's even in a worse situation where, I think it's kind of interesting how this has played out, where it's like, oh, Brett Favre and Dick Vermeil said this. Almost everybody else is on Deshaun Watson's side. Colin, like literally everybody is in support of him, because have you seen anyone in the media being like, hey, take it easy on the Texans? Like, nobody's on their side. So, we found like the two guys, one guy that's old school and another guy that's even older school, and Favre, who's a bit of a hypocrite considering how he held the Packers hostage when he retired 4 straight years. So for Deshaun here, I just want to see him. I don't know, obviously, him well enough to go which coaching staff is he more aligned with. But you should be able to give up 3 firsts for him and feel good about it. I mean, not that the Trevor Lawrence thing would ever even happen, but if you were the Jags and you could say, like, hey, we'll give you Trevor Lawrence for Deshaun, you'd do it in a second because of his age and the fact that we've already seen him do it. So 3 first-rounders for some of these quarterbacks that we've never even seen play in the game. Like, we've never actually seen them do it on Sundays, and teams are moving 3 first-rounders for these guys. I'd do that in a second for a guy like Deshaun. Throw in the running back. It doesn't matter. I just want him to go somewhere where he's happy with the coaching staff, because it's never happened for him, really, I think, with the Houston Texans.
All right, the Ryen Russillo podcast. We got to get together soon. As you well know, I'm leaving your neighborhood, so I only got like 6. I know. It's not going to be the same without me. I'm not to be humble.
Did you tell Vince Vaughn yet?
I haven't seen Vince lately. I've been spending time in hospitals, so I haven't had time to talk to Vince Vaughn. All right, buddy. Good seeing you.
I'll tell him.
All right. Hey, Ryen Russillo, The Ringer. Good podcast. By the way, the Carolina situation is really interesting, and I buy it, and there's a little smoke this morning, according to legitimate people inside that organization, and I'll tell you why it makes a ton of sense. Plus, LeBron, could he play in the NFL? LeBron says so. Thoughts on that next.
Be sure to catch live editions of The Herd weekdays at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific.
So we're starting. We're rolling?
Are we already recording?
Look at that, you got notes. This is so official.
Hey guys, it's Brian Baumgartner. Now, maybe you've heard my podcast, An Oral History of The Office, where we go deep into the making of the show. Now, well, you can go even deeper. That's what she said. Because I am sharing my full-length conversations with some of my favorite people on the planet. The cast and crew of The Office. Guys, we share insights and memories that, even if you are a die-hard fan, you will have never heard these before. This is The Office Deep Dive. What were you doing before The Office started?
I was catering and I was babysitting.
People let you look after their children?
Not at the same time. Yes, they did. And guess what? He's alive and he's a grown man now and he's fine.
Listen to The Office Deep Dive on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
You know, I was thinking about this today as I was drinking coffee coming to work, and I looked down and I had dress shoes on, and I said, why do I wear dress shoes? Half of my job's on radio. Nobody can see. I think this point forward, I'm going tennis shoes. Rest of my life. I wore tennis shoes all last week. I didn't have to show off or anything, dress shoes. And I thought to myself, why am I wearing dress shoes? Would you wear anything that's less comfortable? No. From this point forward, why my wife hates when I wear tennis shoes. I'm going to wear tennis shoes, and I'll have to deal with that part of it later. I'm all tennis shoes now, starting tomorrow. Yeah, she'll be yelling at me, but my feet will be comfortable. So, you accept some things and deal with other things. So there's a story this morning, the Panthers, Carolina, it would go all in for Deshaun Watson. They would give 3 first-round picks, Christian McCaffrey, and Teddy Bridgewater. And I think it actually works for both teams. So I think Deshaun works for the Jets. I think Deshaun works for Carolina. I think he works for a lot of people, but here's why it works. First of all, Christian McCaffrey's still a star, but he got banged up last year. He's a running back. Once they start getting banged up, they generally don't get healthier. Number 2 is 3 first-round picks for a quarterback. Jamal Adams got 2. He's a safety. I do it in a second. But there is this assumption in the NFL that you draft a quarterback, and then over time, you develop a quarterback, and then Super Bowls follow. But let's just think about the last 5 years. Tampa acquires Tom Brady, right, Ryan? Okay. And then they won Super Bowl. And then Peyton Manning went to Denver. And then Jimmy Garoppolo to San Francisco. I didn't draft those quarterbacks. By the way, the Saints never drafted Drew Brees. If you just look at Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, and Garoppolo in the last 5 years, teams don't draft them. Teams don't develop them. They just go acquire them, find them, get them, trade for them, free agent, whatever. And they get to Super Bowls 3 of the last 5 years. Let me throw 2 other quarterbacks out there. Ryan Tannehill was acquired. Kirk Cousins, say what you want. Minnesota, until last year, had been a very high-end NFC team. Again, Drew Brees was not drafted or developed by the Saints. Carolina's got the number 8 pick, and this is really valuable. Carolina would have to give up. To get the quarterback they want in this draft, they would probably have to give up picks to move up. So why not just give up picks and get Deshaun Watson? Well, what's the difference is I know what I get with Deshaun Watson. And I think if you look in division for Carolina, this makes sense. Breeze is retiring, Matt Ryan's past his peak, and Brady's old. And I also think from the Houston Texans perspective. First of all, what you need is first-round picks. You get 3 minimum. What you need is a little star power. Christian McCaffrey is star power. What you need is a bridge quarterback and a quarterback for the future. Well, Teddy Bridgewater went 5-0 last year, not this past year, the year before when he had to start in New Orleans. So you get a bridge quarterback, kind of an Alex Smith level guy for a year, who's a very good mentor, very smart guy, and then you could take that 8 pick and you could draft another quarterback because there's 5 quarterbacks going to get drafted in the first round. Mac Jones is probably 5. You'd probably get Trey Lance, who, by the way, Trey Lance has a little Deshaun Watson where he, he's a winning quarterback. He's got a lot of mobility. He's got an above-average arm. He's a playmaker. That's what Deshaun is. Deshaun's not your classic pocket guy, but he's a playmaker. So if I'm the Houston Texans, I could get Bridgewater bridge for a year. I get a star running back. I get draft picks. I got J.J. Watt just left. Deshaun just left. So now I have some draft capital. I mean, you got to remember what Houston has. They have a dilemma. They got no draft picks and no cap space. And this could take care of a lot of that stuff. So I don't think it's crazy. I don't believe this. There's only one way to do it with quarterbacks. Peyton Manning wasn't drafted by Denver. Brady wasn't drafted by Tampa. Garoppolo wasn't drafted by the Niners. Ryan Tannehill not drafted by the Titans. Kirk Cousins not drafted. You can go acquire guys, and I think what you're going to see is, and you're really going to see this with Chicago and Indianapolis, where Chicago's defense is good enough to win a Super Bowl. They probably need to get a quarterback. They absolutely need to get a quarterback, and they probably have to have a fairly strong draft on the offensive line and wide receiver. I'm not sure if Allen Robinson wants to stay. Maybe he does if Wentz comes. Big-armed Wentz and Allen Robinson, to me, would be a great combo. And the Colts, similarly. Colts I don't necessarily buy San Francisco's moving off Garoppolo. I keep hearing that. I have a hard time believing a quarterback goes like 26-6, and you want to got to the Super Bowl in his first year as a starter. Everybody's absolutely sure the Cowboys won't move off Dak, but everybody's sure the Niners will move off Garoppolo. Well, Garoppolo has a higher winning percentage than Dak, and I just don't believe Kyle Shanahan's going to trade Garoppolo and go into a season trying to. Kyle Shanahan's got to start winning games. Right now, it's all based on reputation, his dad, what we think he will be as a coach. He's got to win more games now. So I think Garoppolo wins games. So we'll see how it goes. But this one I kind of buy into with Deshaun Watson. I think it works for both teams, and I'd like to see it happen. And listen, Deshaun Watson's miserable. He doesn't want to play in Houston. And, I understand he signed a contract. I get it. But the reality is, do you want somebody in-house that's miserable? And the answer is almost always in sports, no. You don't want a coach that wants another job, and you don't want a quarterback that wants to play somewhere else. And it just happens to be a year. You could get Bridgewater and a rising star in the draft. Go for it. Quarterback dominoes. I'll make predictions next.
Want more Herd? The Herd streams 24 hours a day, 7 days a week within the iHeartRadio app. Search Herd to listen live or on
Here
demand.
we go. It is hour 2. It is great to have you in, live in Los Angeles. This is The Herd. Wherever you may be and however you may be listening or watching, we are on iHeartRadio, Fox Sports Radio, and FS1. I am feeling better. Thanks for all the thoughts and inspirational words. Feeling pretty good. Joy Taylor is joining me. We're going to play a game of quarterback dominoes here in a second. Joy, how are things?
Doing good. I'm glad you're back with us and feeling better. It's kind of a chaotic week for you, but
I'm also moving. Yeah, it is a lot of boxes around the house. It just sometimes in life, it all kind of falls apart or kind of feels like there's chaos all in the same week. So I could have picked a better week to move, but that's life and we move on. Thank you, Joy. So there's a lot of stories today that are out. Carson Wentz is going to be moved here. Philadelphia is trading him. It's official. A lot of top NFL people, Adam Schefter has already reported that. That's going to happen very soon. We've already seen the Matt Stafford deal. Now, these deals aren't official until later in March, but they're agreed upon. So you're going to see something happen this week with Carson Wentz. You may see something with Deshaun Watson. And so I thought this morning we'd play a little bit of quarterback dominoes. I'm just going to roll the dice out, make a few predictions, and I'm going to try to guess where people land as of this morning and as of the reports I hear. So here we go. I'm going to say the Panthers acquired Deshaun Watson. Why? Because you can give Houston everything they'd want. A bridge quarterback, a draft pick, 3 first-round picks, and Christian McCaffrey star power. If you lose Deshaun, you need some star power. This is an organization that needs first-round picks. And remember, Matt Rule has power in the organization. He's a brand new coach. David Tepper, the owner of that team, he's a roll the dice guy. He is a highly aggressive Steve Ballmer-like owner. They would make a move like this. They'd give up multiple picks, Christian McCaffrey. So I'll go with Panthers acquire Deshaun Watson. Second, I think the Texans then would acquire in the same deal Teddy Bridgewater. He is a perfect one-year bridge quarterback. You're also going to get the 8th pick. I'll talk about that in a second. But Bridgewater was 5-0 as a starter a couple years ago when he subbed. He's not a huge cap hit. He also has the ability to learn offenses very quickly. So there's been some chaos in Houston. He's a very non-chaotic personality. He's very Alex Smith. He walks in, he learns your playbook in 3 weeks, and he's respected by other professional athletes. This organization needs a steady hand. Bridgewater's the ultimate steady hand. The Jets then, I think, draft Zach Wilson. I'm a Sam Darnold guy. I think he needs a reboot somewhere else. Get to that in a second. But Darnold is 11-22 in 3 seasons. He regressed. He's only 23 years old. I think he needs a reboot. But the reality is, Joe Douglas did not draft Sam Darnold. GMs generally want their guys Zach Wilson, according to NFL people I talked to, grades higher than Sam Darnold did out of USC. Jets get Zach Wilson. After that, I think the Colts acquire Sam Darnold. They liked him out of USC. This is becoming a run-first offense, 55-45. Darnold's still 23. They'll have a year to decide on his fifth-year option. He's a big, strong, athletic, mobile kid. They were limited with Phillip Rivers. They could not move the pocket. Frank Reich has worked with Carson Wentz. He likes athletes at quarterback. Darnold goes, reboots, and tries to prove his worth with the Colts. The Bears then acquire Carson Wentz. They're more desperate. Their GM and their head coach are on the hot seat. Wentz is a strong-arm quarterback. That ball will pierce through that wind. It certainly did in Philadelphia. Also, the Bears have declined to pick up the fifth-year option of Trubisky, so they're obviously moving on. They don't see Nick Foles as the future, and they're a little brother to Aaron Rodgers. You got to have a cannon back there. You're going to go up against Aaron Rodgers twice a year. You got to go for the big smoke. You got to go get Carson Wentz, who's a big talent. From there, I think the Patriots acquire Marcus Mariota. Not a big cap hit. Played in the AFC. He knows the conference. He's an experienced kid. And the reality is, I think after 1 year with Cam, it makes sense. An athletic quarterback who's a fairly accurate thrower. I believe the offensive line, this is going to be, I think you're going to see a better version of what they were last year on offense. The defense we know is getting better because guys opt back in. But I can see them going and getting Marcus Mariota. The Falcons then draft Justin Fields. He's from a high school right outside of Atlanta. They're not going to get rid of Matt Ryan for the next 2 years. But Matt's 35. He's past his prime. And Fields is sort of the opposite of Matt Ryan. He's a bigger arm, very athletic. There's still a lot of people in Atlanta that kind of miss Michael Vick running around making stuff happen. Justin Fields from Atlanta, got a lot of sizzle, probably not ready to start in the NFL, so perfect. You get Matt Ryan for a year or two to run the ship. After that, I think the Texans draft Trey Lance. Again, he's got a little Deshaun Watson. He can throw the ball fine, but he's a playmaker. He can sit under Teddy Bridgewater, who we mentioned earlier, for 1 year. So you get your quarterback of the future, you get quarterback now Bridgewater, you get Christian McCaffrey, some of that RPO stuff, and you get 3 or 4 first-round picks. I think this is about as solid and strong a case to be made for Houston moving off Deshaun Watson. And number 9, I think the Saints re-sign Jameis Winston. I think he's got a higher floor than Taysom Hill. I think we saw the ceiling with Taysom Hill last year throwing the football. Never forget that Jameis led the NFL 2 years ago with 5,100 passing yards. He's not highly expensive, and they can't afford right now big money at quarterback. And with Jameis, you get him cheap. He can be productive. And also, we always acknowledge every quarterback's better in the second year of a system. Just because Jameis didn't play a lot doesn't mean he didn't learn a lot. So there's my rundown. Now there's 2 quarterbacks I want to mention. Jimmy Garoppolo, I believe, stays in San Francisco. They retain him. We looked it up during the break. He's 24-8 as a starting quarterback in the league. 75% winners. Kyle Shanahan's in a division now with Matt Stafford, with Kyler Murray, with Russell Wilson. He's got to have a veteran quarterback who can win games and spin it. I think Garoppolo can, despite some misgivings about his health. I think they retain him, and I think the Cowboys retain Dak Prescott. They just won 4 of 11 games without him. He was off to a very productive, he wasn't winning, but a very productive start with Mike McCarthy before he got injured. And I think he works for Dallas right now. It's all about the number. Can they find it at 32 to 33, not 37 or 38? But these are my quarterback dominoes as of this morning. Again, I'm guessing it all starts with Deshaun to the Panthers, but it kind of works for me. And with that, Mark Schlereth, 2-time Pro Bowler, 3 Super Bowl rings, now joining me live. All right, Mark, let's start with this. First of all, my quarterback, that's a lot of quarterback movement. But we are seeing a little trend in the NFL, Mark, where you don't have to just draft and develop a quarterback. We saw Peyton Manning in Denver, Garoppolo San Francisco, Brady in Tampa. You can acquire one. Let me ask you, given the option, would you rather acquire a talented quarterback or draft and develop? And remember, when you develop, there's still a 50% chance that they don't work out. How do you view that?
Oh, I would rather go out and get myself a veteran quarterback if at all possible. And in doing that, if you can build your roster to the point where your roster is really good, and then get your quarterback, then find your guy, then you've got an opportunity to, while you find your guy, you've already built the roster around that guy, much like what Tampa Bay was able to do during the years before they went out and got Brady. So, I'm a believer in roster building. I'm a believer in capturing both lines of scrimmage defensively and offensively. And if you look throughout the playoffs, the team that captured the line of scrimmage won all the playoff games. And, I understand that everybody had a good quarterback going into the playoffs, and I think that's a prerequisite to be a playoff team. But to win in the playoffs, you've got to have a damn good roster to really win. And I think that's one of the things that we often over the time just kind of throw to the wayside and say, well, it's all about the quarterback. It's all about the quarterback. No, it's not. You've got to have the roster to provide the opportunity for the quarterback to do his thing.
It's interesting with Carson Wentz. You've done games now for our network,
Sure.
So you see quarterbacks live. It was rough in the middle of last year. I mean, it was rough for Carson Wentz. Were the issues in your eyes correctable? Because I think Chicago is in a fairly desperate place, and they're going to go out and get him. I don't feel the Colts have a big brother in their division, but I think when you have Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay, you got to make something happen, or a GM or a coach are going to lose their job. So I think Chicago goes and gets him. Is he correctable? Can you coach your way out of some of this stuff?
Well, I don't think there's any question that a guy is correctable. I mean, we've seen him in the past play efficiently. What we saw was a guy that got sacked 50 times in 12 games, whose mechanics fell apart because of the pressure. So I look at it as, cause and effect. There was so much pressure early that his mechanics fell apart. His mechanics were bad, which created, horrible throws and some of the decision making that went on with that. So is that correctable? Yeah, I think it's correctable, but a lot of things have to fall in place. The other thing you have to understand about Doug Peterson and his play calling is Doug Peterson does not ever want to run the ball. He wants to throw it all the time. And I think ultimately, if you put him in a position where he's got more balance, then it's easier to kind of have that football rehab while you're still playing. So there's a lot of things that I look at with Carson Wentz that say these are all problems. But at the same time, I think they're correctable problems, and we have seen this guy play really well in the past.
You've also done Seattle games. For the first time in his career, Russell Wilson in the last 6-7 days has actually been outspoken against his offensive line, against the front office. This is not customary for Russell. What do you make of these little shots?
Yeah, I was disappointed. I was disappointed because I see a lot of things in Russell Wilson's game that create pressure. I mean, here's a guy that obviously is a supremely gifted, very talented player, but also a guy that extends plays, that holds on to the ball, that essentially brings a lot of the onus on himself. So when you start talking about sacks, and if you look at his career, it's always, between 40 and 50 sacks. Well, some of it is because he's going to hold on to the ball and he's going to create plays down the football field, almost schoolyard type stuff. And when you do that, guess what happens? You extend those plays, you're going to extend the pressure that's put upon you. So some of the sacks, and I would say a large portion of them, and I think this is why the Seattle coaching staff was so upset with him being outspoken, was a lot of those sacks go directly on Russell Wilson. What people have to understand is when we divvy up the blame for sacks, when we sit in an offensive meeting room, they'll say, hey, man, that was on the left guard, or hey, that was on the right tackle, or hey, that was on the tight end, or that was on the running back. Most people, I think, would be very surprised where the coaching staff will say, that's on our quarterback. That's on our quarterback. You have to get rid of the football. And if you extend the play that way, then expect to get hit. And that's the disappointing part to me is, are you really looking at the overall, at the overall body of work, and how many of these things are you bringing upon yourself because you want to hold on and make a big play? And you make plenty of big plays, there's no question, but a lot of those sacks or a lot of those hits and pressures are directly attributed to the way you play.
So J.J. Watt's a free agent. He's made a lot of money. He's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. Very few players have this opportunity in the NFL where they can kind of pick where they want to go. It's rare, and, J.J. has certainly earned that. I saw a story this morning, which I don't really buy. Cleveland, to me, is not consistent enough. He's already come out of chaos. We're just a year away from massive chaos in Cleveland. That doesn't feel right to me. Maybe I'm wrong. Is there a landing spot? You're at games every weekend. Where does he fit to you?
Well, I think there's several different places that J.J. Watt fits. Obviously, like you mentioned, here's a guy that's been a Defensive Player of the Year. He's a first ballot Hall of Famer. The guy's an incredible player. But if you start to look at teams that make sense, the Kansas City Chiefs, the Green Bay Packers, the Baltimore Ravens, those to me are the teams where you put a J.J. Watt in there in a rotational system and you get the best out of him, and you've got the offense, you've got the building blocks in place for that guy to be able to do his thing. Wow, what an incredible asset. So I would have to say that I have to go, if I'm J.J. Watt and I get to handpick, I got to go to a place that instantly gives me a Super Bowl aspirations. And so one of those three teams makes the most sense to me.
By the way, when you go to a new team, you went from Washington to Denver. Maybe it's different for offensive linemen because it's such a cohesive unit. So much of that is chemistry and choreography. But we got all these guys bouncing around all over the place. Tom Brady, they needed a bye late in the year to kind of get their act together. They had a lot of turbulence. You had seen them. They were kind of an average team. And how long do you feel... maybe Brady just is a total game changer and you can walk in and you can figure it out. But all these moves we talk about, did you feel like when you played in Denver, did you feel like halfway through the season, I know the playbook, I know it, I don't think, I play, or does it take longer than that?
Oh, I think it takes longer to have that feel and to get that work in and to be a cohesive unit, to play beside a guy, to have that communication that goes on, and just to understand the playbook, like what you're expecting to be called in a certain situation. I think those things, that anticipatory standpoint of playing offensive football, and I think that's even more dramatic with the quarterback. And one of the things that was interesting in talking to Brady over the course of the year, I did 4 Tampa games, that I found really interesting about Tom Brady was he said, during my time in New England when it's cool out, I could always get all the extra practice in. I get all those extra reps in. Anything that we screwed up during the course of the day, we would, when the defense was practicing, we'd be out there on the side doing our thing and correcting those things. Because in Tampa, I couldn't do that until late in the season because it's so hot that, the guys' hamstrings, they're worried about cramping. They're doing all this stuff. They're getting their electrolytes in. And they're drinking drinking their water and doing all that stuff because we couldn't get any extra work in until the heat broke, late in November type of thing. So there was that aspect of not getting the extra work in that he had been so used to getting in all those years in New England. So that was another thing that kind of hamstrung them early in the season that they were able to kind of overcome late in the season.
By the way, that's interesting. You did 4 Tampa games. What was the last one you did? And did you sense doing that last game, Mark, had you seen a marked improvement from the first week? Because I thought one of the stories of Tampa was the cohesiveness of the O-line. Nobody talked about the O-line, but they became kind of a dominant unit in the last 2 and 3 games. Did you notice in your last Tampa game, what was it, who they play?
The last one was Detroit. They blew them out in the first half, and then they sat everybody. So, but here's what I really noticed. I knew from day one that their defense was incredibly talented. The back end was remarkable. Their 2 linebackers on the inside are are phenomenal. Their ability to shut down the run and let their pass rushers get after you. I knew their defense from week one was incredible. Really what happened was kind of the nonverbal communication and how you fit all these pieces together with Tom Brady. The other part of that was really interesting is being able to meld together kind of a philosophical approach to Tom Brady and the way he's done everything kind of pre-snap, and Bruce Arians, who's always kind of done everything post-snap for the quarterback. And so you had to really fit those two things together. And talking to Bruce Arians before that last game I called, it was like a week 13, week 14, whatever it was. Bruce Arians said that was something that Tom and I really had to not so much battle, but really work together so that we could meld those two kind of thought processes together to give us the best opportunity for him to feel comfortable and also for my offense to work.
That's really smart. Pre and post snap. Yeah. Good stuff there, Mark Schlereth. By the way, I don't know if you're moving, but I'd never seen this part of your house before. It's very stately.
Well, you know what? We redid our study, so this used to be all brown, and now it is all white.
It's very stately. Very
yes. Right. Eventually, I'm going to put many leather-bound books in those shelves behind me.
Mark Schlereth, Fox Sports analyst. Good seeing you, bud.
Likewise, my friend.
I love hearing that. Isn't that funny? That Brady's more pre-snap, Arians is more post-snap, and it just took him time and time to figure that thing out. And when they did, they were pretty good. So he did the Detroit game. Remember that game was over in about 8 minutes. They got lucky. A lot of this stuff is momentum and confidence. They played Atlanta twice in the end, and that's not a very good defense. And then they played Detroit late, and that wasn't a very good defense. So all of a sudden, your personnel's the same, but you're feeling less pressure. Tom's feeling more confident. You get some momentum. You get some blowouts. And post-bye, they never lost a football game. So it's just interesting to hear guys who actually sit in those pre-production meetings like Schlereth.
Be sure to catch live editions of The Herd weekdays at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific on Fox Sports Radio, FS1, and the iHeart Radio app.
Looking for a new podcast? You do not want to miss Under the Influence. I'm your host, Joe Piazza, and I'm taking you into the depths of the mom internet, a place that preys on some new mothers while also minting millionaires.
Instagram ruined women for a time.
Influencers certainly feel the pressure. How could I have a baby and not share it?
Welcome to Momstagram. It's not for influencers, it's for under the influences.
Join me to dive down this rabbit hole and find out how the commodification of motherhood is driving a lot of us to the edge of our sanity. Listen to Under the Influence with Joe Piazza on the iHeart Radio app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Sunday on Fox, the NASCAR Cup Series returns to Daytona as Chase Elliott looks to defend his win at the 14-turn road course. All the action starts Sunday at 3 Eastern on Fox and the Fox Sports app.
Jersey Mike's app is short for appetizing. Save 25% with your order if you put in the code JMikes25. Jersey Mike's, be a sub above. Tomorrow is Wednesday on our show. How long is that? Are we going to eat for free? I hope so tomorrow. That's kind of a new thing on the show, and I've got to be honest. I like it. Joy Taylor with the news.
No. Turn on the news. This is the Herd Line News.
Jersey Mike's Day is a good day around the herd. We get excited. The contract that will never end. I wonder how much time we've spent talking about Dak Prescott's contract.
So what did he say now? What was it? Was it an optimistic spin? What's he saying?
Well, there's no news out of Dallas, of course, but he has shown that he is still committed to the franchise. Tight end Blake Jarwin posted a picture with Dak and tagged him with the comments, "Want to run it back in a few months?" And Dak shared the post and said, "That's the only way I see it." So Dak wants to be back with Dallas. I don't know if that's necessarily news, but in this new NFL free agency period where we follow every single breadcrumb and look into everything that everyone says, this is news. Dak wants to be there. I don't see Dak not being in Dallas. I don't know what Dallas is going to do without Dak Prescott. Of course, it's always come down to, can they get a long-term deal done? Obviously, Dallas did have a long-term deal on the table, just wasn't as much as Dak wanted. I think that the injury will change some things once they come to the table again. It's going to cost Dallas $37.7 million to franchise tag Dak again. He played on the $31.4 million tag last season, so it's not very frugal of Dallas to tag him again. And you know what you're getting with Dak Prescott. So, I mean, from Dak's perspective, you had the injury. You understand now the whole perspective. He bet on himself, which I had no problem with him doing, but that is a factor and can really affect what the money that you're going to make long term. And Dallas is going to be paying almost $40 million for Dak this year if they franchise tag him. So hopefully this gets worked out. I could never have anticipated that this contract would go as long as it has, especially for someone like Dak that I think everyone really likes and thinks is the franchise quarterback for Dallas.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's it comes down to, my mom used to always say this, you can't have a milk budget and want champagne. There is a salary cap. They're paying a lot of people, so you want to get that number at 32, 33. You don't want to pay a champagne price. You know what I mean? The key here is they like Dak. They like him. It's just there is a price here. And again, I'm not blaming Dak because they paid Zeke too early. Tyron Smith, I swear to God, has a 25-year contract. DeMarcus Lawrence is now a bad contract. I would have kept Byron Jones. They let him left. So Dallas has a couple of issues here. One, they have overpaid for good, not exceptional players. And I can tell you what Dak's agent's saying. That's not our fault. We're not taking a discount because you've overpaid for pass rushers and wide receivers. That's Dak's best argument. Is my guy in the 4 division years he was healthy, won the division twice, and through 5 games led the NFL in passing yards. So Dak's got a lot of momentum here. Also, last year felt like joy. The Cowboys there was some chaos. I mean, I think that's fair to say with Mike Nolan. Well, Dak is the opposite of chaos. So you're not just paying for Dak's talent and his leadership, but there's a stability with Dak. He's a very formidable person. So, I can have...
Yeah, he's the franchise quarterback.
And he's like a grown-up. Like, he always says the right thing. He's always good. He's a little anti-Baker. He always says the right thing at the podium. He quells the storm. So, listen, I can say, Dak, I don't want to pay that champagne contract, but he's got a lot of leverage here. And as you and I know, a lot of times you get paid, not just on talent, you get paid on timing, you get paid on leverage. Dak is anti-chaos, and last year the Cowboys felt like chaos. So I think he's going to end up getting kind of what he wants.
Well, they should have saved some of that champagne budget for the guy that they needed to pay champagne money to. So, J.J. Watt has gotten plenty of interest since being released by the Texans. The Browns are one of those teams. Cleveland will reportedly take a look and discuss going after Watt this offseason. And according to Mary Kay Cabot, Watt is considering Cleveland as one of his options because they have what he wants, cap space, and a roster that can contend for a title. The Browns have $21.7 million in cap space entering next season. That's the 10th most in the NFL. I'm with you. I don't think that this is a likely destination for J.J. Watt. I do think that J.J. Watt wants the most amount of teams interested out there. So I think this is, I think the Browns being interested is real. And I think J.J. Watt being interested in the Browns is real as far as let's get as many teams talking about signing me as possible. Like, that's beneficial to both parties. I don't think this is where he's going to end up. To your point, we've had 1 year of Browns stability. I like everything the Browns are doing. I believe in Kevin Stefanski. I think he did establish a culture there. I think they're comfortable with the pieces that they have, and they're comfortable with Baker, and they are going to keep improving. But let's wait and see. I'm in complete wait and see mode for the Browns for a while because we've watched inconsistency with the Browns for decades. Yeah. So I don't believe that. I do think that they're on the right path, but they're not in a Super Bowl. They're not in a Super Bowl conversation. I don't care what happened in the playoffs this year. Yeah. That's not what's actually happening with the Browns. They're improving, they're growing, they're building. All that's wonderful. But there's certain teams that are in the Super Bowl conversation and have a Super Bowl window. You're growing towards that. J.J. Watt is not going to be the piece that's going to put you over the top there. He could be a piece, but not the piece. Yeah. So if I'm J.J. Watt, I want to go somewhere that can definitely win a Super Bowl next year. The Packers being one of those places. I actually think that the Steelers could be realistic. I don't really like Ben Roethlisberger as the quarterback option there, but maybe he wants to play with his brother. NFL Network's Mike Girardi just tweeted that Titans GM John Robinson said the team has reached out to J.J. Watt. Obviously, Mike Vrabel was Watt's defensive coordinator in Houston, so there's a tie there. I actually like that move. That's an interesting option.
Well, also, I think what we would both admit, the Titans had the double whammy last year. No pass rush, and the weakest part of their defense was the back end. So they really need to go out and spend money on a pass rusher. They can't even afford. My guess is Tennessee in the draft is going to draft a pass rusher. So if they could get J.J. Watt and draft one, it would go a long way to solving both their problems, which is you had all day to throw against the Titans last year. Good stuff. Joy.
So.
You have one more. Go ahead.
I have one more, yeah. A team that you have a great affection for, the Jazz, continued their hot streak last night. 134-123 win over the 76ers. Jordan Clarkson led Utah with a season-high 40 points off the bench and made a career-high 8 3-pointers. This was their 8th straight win and 19 in their last 20 games. They're first in the West with a 23-5 record, which is the best start through 28 games in Jazz franchise history. They're the only team to rank in top 5 both offensive and defensive efficiency this season, and they're averaging 16.8 made 3-pointers per game, which is first in the NBA. So the Jazz are absolutely rolling right now.
Yeah, but for the record, Joy, if you recall, they were last year, and then was it Bogdanovich got hurt, broke his wrist or broke his arm, and they lost a 3-point component. When healthy, just take the Lakers out of it because the LeBron factor. They don't have anybody on this team that matches up with LeBron. If you took the Lakers out of the NBA, I could make the argument. We've always felt they were a little like the Celtics West. They have the most interesting components. Donovan Mitchell can score. They've got the big that can be the rim protector. They got Ingles and guys on the wings that can shoot. They've got a coach like Brad Stevens. They stress defense. They've got a lot of championship stuff here. The question's always been, do they have an elite wing defender to guard a Kawhi or to guard a LeBron? That I don't think they have. So I think they're a very good team that probably has a slightly lower ceiling. But I actually watch the Jazz more than most teams because I spent some time in Utah. When you watch them, you get why they win. They do a lot of things well. Good stuff. Joy with the news.
Well, that's the news.
And thanks for stopping by.
The Herd Lie News.
It's it is funny. I was talking to a friend this week, and LeBron James just drives him nuts. And, when it comes to LeBron James, I'm into the basketball stuff. I know sometimes he's been political, and there was the China kind of debacle, which got all sorts of people in the NBA, the commissioner and owners and GMs in trouble. But LeBron said something offhand, and I can just see how it drives his critics nuts. But what he said, he's right about, and it may be nuts to a lot of people, but he said something this week kind of offhanded, and basketball is not the only league he would star in. We'll talk about that next.
Be sure to catch live editions of The Herd weekdays at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific.
At what point must we become a monster in order to catch one?
From iHeartRadio comes a mind-bending new original sci-fi thriller, Tomorrow's Monsters.
It's a safe application with one very simple benefit. You never have to sleep again.
Starring John Boyega.
When he began self-experimenting with his own mind apps, it changed him. And something else has taken over.
And Darren Criss.
We don't do what we do simply because we love humanity. We detest the weakness in them.
From iHeartRadio, Flynn Picture Company, Psychopia Pictures, and Upper Room Productions. Also starring Marley Shilton, Clark Gregg, and Savan Gauja. Tomorrow's Monsters. Available now on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Here's exposure 1. Ready?
So, LeBron's polarizing. It's funny. Most polarizing athletes, I understand why they're polarizing. Like Westbrook. He drives you nuts. He gets after fans. He unravels in the playoffs. Like, I get it. Baker Mayfield can be kind of controversial. Like, I get most controversial athletes. Allen Iverson, practice. I don't want to practice. Well, a lot of old school people don't want to hear that. Like, I get it. Bobby Knight, we all understand that. I don't really get the LeBron controversy. He builds schools for kids. He once held a press conference, said, I'm going to play in Miami. I don't get it. The China stuff, everybody stepped in quicksand with that, those comments. But he said this, and I just thought this would drive people nuts. LeBron, there was a lockout in the NBA in 2011, like 9 years ago, and LeBron started changing his body for football. He said he loves football. He watches it every Sunday. He's on Twitter. He loves it. And he said the Seahawks had called him about a tryout in 2011. And LeBron came out and told The Athletic, I would have made the team. I would have tried out, but I would have made the team. One thing about it, I don't mind working for something. So, Cowboys, Seahawks, I would have stayed home, went back home to Cleveland. I would have tried, but I would have made the team. I know what I'm capable of doing on a football field, especially at that age. Now, LeBron was an all-state receiver in Ohio. Ohio's a good football state. He was like a sophomore. He was all-state as a sophomore. There's some pictures of him. Didn't have a greatest quarterback, but he was, listen, he was much more slender then than now. But, you can see he's an athlete. And, Travis Kelce is right now the best tight end in football. He's 6'5", 260, and runs a 4.6. LeBron is 6'9", 250, and in 2013 ran a 4.6. And LeBron would probably gain 10 to 12 pounds to be an NFL tight end. LeBron's always been great about changing his body. The question isn't whether LeBron James would have made the NFL. The question is, how great would he have been? He would have been a much better football player than Michael Jordan was a baseball player. Michael Jordan didn't even look like a baseball player. If you watch Michael Jordan, he was too tall and gangly. He had a massive strike zone. What you want to have is a small little strike zone where a pitcher has to put it in perfect spaces. Michael was long. He had a long swing. He didn't run particularly well. He was a long strider. Like I always said this, Tim Tebow, you can look at Tim Tebow and say he could look a little bit like a baseball player. Michael didn't even look like a baseball player to me. He was too long and angular. LeBron James looks like a football player. And here's the thing. Jimmy Graham played almost no college football. He made 5 Pro Bowls. Antonio Gates played no college football, and he's going to make the Hall of Fame. The Colts have a guy named Mo Alley Cox, played no high school football. No, he played no college football. He played 1 year of high school football, and he's now a good tight end. So tight end's a very unique position. It's where you take the athlete and you kind of teach him often how to play. Now, occasionally you get a great guy in the draft, but we have multiple examples at tight end where you cannot play a bunch of football in high school and college. And football's not golf, it's not tennis, it's not baseball, it's not even basketball or soccer. It's not about hours. If you're a great athlete, you can teach a guy how to play tight end. You can teach a guy, if he's got the physical components, you don't have to teach LeBron how to run and catch. He's got great hand-eye coordination. He's big, he's fast, he's strong, and we're looking at some video here. So the question with LeBron is, of course he would have made the NFL. The question is, how great would he have been? I don't think there's any question. He admits that Urban Meyer recruited him. Urban Meyer at the time may have been at Notre Dame. But, listen, LeBron, just think about this in the red zone. 6'9", 260, runs a fade. Who in the NFL matches up to that? Nobody. He's faster than Gronk. He's bigger and stronger than Travis Kelce. He may not be as crazy as George Kittle, but there's a component where there's some George Kittle going on with LeBron James. So, and again, 6'9", 250, 260, 4'6". I don't even think it's an argument. I think tight end's one of those positions. You just find an athlete. We got Antonio Gates, Mo Alley Cox, Jimmy Graham. They don't have a lot of football. They're basketball dudes. They just kind of figure out how to play. Get to the weight room, add some weight, and I don't remember if Jimmy Graham was a lousy blocker. I don't think Mo Alley Cox is much of a blocker. I don't know if Antonio Gates, I think, was okay. Better receiver than blocker though. All right, so I showed you top of this hour. We play quarterback dominoes, and there's going to be a lot of movement happening right now. We got 5 quarterbacks that are going to get drafted in the first round. Mac Jones will be the last, but you're going to have 5 quarterbacks drafted, and we know there's going to be all sorts of movement. Marcus Mariota is going to get options. Sam Darnold's going to move. Deshaun Watson probably moves. Carson Wentz, according to Adam Schefter, is going to move here in the next couple of days. Matt Stafford has already moved. Jared Goff has already moved. So I did it earlier where we played a little bit of quarterback dominoes, and the story today is Deshaun Watson and Carolina would go all in for him. So, and I do think that Carolina can give them everything. They can give Houston a quarterback, a star running back in McCaffrey. They said they would do it, and 3 first-round picks. So it makes sense. So I said I can see Deshaun going to Carolina, where Matt Rule has a hyper-aggressive owner who would okay any big star power move. Plus, Carolina's a market. They put their arms around Cam. They like their quarterback stars. I think the Texans would then acquire Teddy Bridgewater and picks and Christian McCaffrey. I think the Jets are going to draft Zach Wilson out of BYU. Nothing against Sam Darnold. I like him. He's only 23, but he's 11-22. He regressed badly, and I think the general manager and the coach, they tend to want their own quarterback. I think the Colts are going to go get Sam Darnold. I don't think they're going to pay what Carson Wentz is going to fetch in Chicago. Darnold is young. This is becoming a run-based offense. If you put Sam Darnold into this offense, they're about another receiver away. Paris Campbell was hurt last year, but Michael Pittman became a star this year at the end, as Buffalo's secondary, and Paris Campbell. So they draft another wide receiver. They're ready to win now. Talk about going from the outhouse to the penthouse. The Jets O-line to the Colts O-line. Holy God. I think the Bears pay for Carson Wentz, being they need him. They got a GM on the hot seat, the coach in the hot seat, and they got Big Brother Green Bay they're always chasing. Carson Wentz is a massive upgrade, physical tools over Trubisky or Nick Foles. I think the Patriots, I can see him sticking with Cam, but I would say they'd probably go out and get a Marcus Mariota. He's going to have some interest in the market. They don't currently have a quarterback. Cam, I think. He's cheap. They just ran some of the offense he'd be capable of running. He's athletic, which I think as the game changes, Belichick tends to be an evolver, an adapter. The game is changing. Mobile quarterbacks matter. I think the Falcons go draft Justin Fields. It's perfect. He's from just outside Atlanta. He doesn't need to play for 2 years. Matt Ryan's cap hit would be punitive if they moved him. They won't, but he learns how to play football from a Pro Bowl guy in Matt Ryan. I think the Texans then draft Trey Lance, who's got a little Deshaun Watson, the playmaker, and have him play behind Teddy Bridgewater for a year. And then you got yourself a star. I think the Saints re-sign Jameis Winston. I think he's got a higher ceiling than Taysom Hill. Listen, Jameis threw for 5,000 yards. He'd be in his second year with Sean Payton, and he's not terribly expensive. I think it makes sense. I think he's got a higher ceiling than Taysom Hill. And then I do think Garoppolo stays with the Niners and Dak stays with the Cowboys. I'll believe. I just can't see Kyle Shanahan going into a division now. Sean McVay, Matt Stafford twice, Russell Wilson twice, Kyler Murray twice, and I'm going with a rookie quarterback. I think Garoppolo sticks for another year. The Herd.
Want more Herd? The Herd streams 24 hours a day, 7 days a week within the iHeartRadio app. Search Herd to listen live or on demand whenever you
The Fox Bet Super 6 NBA contest for a chance to win cash when you pick the outcomes of 6 of today's NBA games. Download the app now and play for free for your chance to win.
Nice. Bucky Brooks, we use him here at Fox Sports. He played in the NFL. He is a scout in the NFL. And he dealt with that pro day with Trevor Lawrence. And Bucky Brooks is now joining us live. This is the time of the year we can really go deep with Bucky Brooks. So, listen, this has been a kid. I saw him playing. I saw him at a high school workout in San Diego, and I just was blown away by his arm. He's put on about 10 pounds. He's having surgery on his other shoulder. I don't know what that means. I shouldn't. But I mean, you broke down the workout. What do you see from Trevor Lawrence? Any concerns, trepidation? What'd you see?
No, man, he's a very clean prospect, and the thing about it, Colin, he and Justin Fields have been on the scene for a long time. Those guys have always been number one and number two in whatever order since they were in high school. The thing about Trevor Lawrence is Trevor Lawrence has gotten better each and every year. He was at Clemson. On the field, he gives you everything that you look for. He's athletic. He has outstanding arm talent. He can make quick decisions. He is pinpoint and precise with the ball. I tend to call him Justin Herbert plus, meaning everything that you like about Justin Herbert plus a little more explosiveness and pop. That is what Trevor Lawrence is. And then when you get off the field, the intangibles, the leadership ability, the way that he led this program in the offseason, not only in terms of the return to play, but doing the social justice movement. Trevor Lawrence is a very mature prospect. He's someone that I can understand why everybody raves about him as a franchise quarterback.
Okay, what quarterback in this draft is do you think? I mean, none of them are undervalued. I mean, we're told we like all of them. Is there anybody that's a little to you more undervalued than the other ones?
Yeah, I think when you look around the mock draft scene, there are a lot of people that have kind of moved Justin Fields down to number 3 and maybe even number 4 in some drafts. And I think that we're making a grave mistake because I think we're being very nitpicky about his game. What Justin Fields is a 5-star talent with outstanding combination of physical tools and overall ability. Now, where he needs to improve is processing in terms of being quicker against coverage and those things. But Colin, we have seen him on big stages look like the best guy on the field on multiple occasions. And I think sometimes we spend a lot of time worrying about how he looked versus Northwestern in Indiana. But in a league in which we've seen Josh Allen become a star player, there's no reason why Justin Fields couldn't become a star player in this league in the right system.
Yeah, I don't get. We do this all the time. I remember people used to beat up on Andrew Luck, didn't have a great arm, and it was good enough. That's all I know. It was good enough. So let me ask you about J.J. Watt. So if you were a scout for multiple teams, you're a GM today. Let's forget J.J. Watt. I think I would bring him in, and I would structure his contract. Like, for instance, Green Bay. Green Bay is a team that leads in 80% of their games. Meaning, if I was talking to the agent of J.J. Watt, I'd say, listen, we're going to be leading. He's going to pin his ears back. Let's do a bonus-based contract. He can get a lot of sacks and a lot of production. He's our missing piece. That makes sense to me. Now, he's older. He's had some injuries. But when I watched him this past year, Bucky, I thought he was a good player. I thought he was a disruptor. Where do you think, what would you be willing to do with J.J. Watt if you ran a front office today? What is he?
Oh, I think he brings a lot of value. I think his leadership ability, I think his pass rush ability certainly is still valuable in today's game. We just saw a Super Bowl where we saw Jason Pierre-Paul and Ndamukong Suh have a major impact as 30-plus-year-old players. So J.J. Watt still offers a tremendous amount of value as a pass rusher. To me, I think the natural fit for him, the Green Bay Packers, having spent time in Green Bay, having known that J.J. Watt is from the Wisconsin area, there's a little bit of legacy there. Remember, he is a brand. The Green Bay Packers are a national brand. He'll get a chance to be on Monday Night Football a ton of times. He'll play with a quarterback in Aaron Rodgers that is guaranteed to put him in situations where he is playing with the lead, so he'll be able to get after the passer. And so when I look at the situation, Green Bay to me is an ideal fit. I will also say the Buffalo Bills. The Buffalo Bills are a great cultural fit for J.J. Watt. This is a team full of hardworking guys. Sean McDermott is a no-nonsense guy that has developed a culture there. I think J.J. Watt will be a nice fit in their situation, and both of those teams score a bunch of points.
Yeah, they do. They play with leads. So, I was saying this earlier. Mike Tomlin's never had a losing season. He gets criticized. Andy Reid dominated the NFC for 5 or 6 years. They ran him out. Belichick had his first losing season in forever, and even guys like me are like, he's a little rigid. Pete Carroll, who was fired multiple times, has now more power than any coach except probably Belichick. In fact, John Snyder almost left to take the Lions job because Pete had so much power in terms of personnel. But yet, as the defense slips in Seattle, and as they have had some very big whiffs in early rounds in Seattle, Pete never really gets, he's a little Teflon. There's a Doc Rivers quality where we like him, he's got a presence, he's won a title, we like him. There's something about, he lights a room up. But when I look at Seattle, since the Super Bowl, Bucky, I feel like sometimes they're making crap up. They're taking big trades weird first-round picks. They go from leading the NFL in rushing to 19th. Pete doesn't get nothing sticks to him. Is it time we examine Pete a little more closely?
Well, I mean, I think he's under more fire now more than ever because Russell Wilson has recently come out and kind of voiced some of his concerns. The thing about it is really hard to take shots at Pete Carroll when you see the amount of success that the Seattle Seahawks have had. They're consistent winners. They're always in the postseason tournament. They're always on the cusp. I think the thing about Pete Carroll and what he's wrestling with now is how do I play the style of football that I want to play with a franchise quarterback? The difference was early in Russell Wilson's tenure, it was easy for Pete to use Russell Wilson as a game manager. Running game, defense, they won a lot of games, went to 2 Super Bowls, won one, probably should have won 2. But since they've handed the keys of the kingdom to Russell Wilson, the team wins, but they don't win at like the optimal level. They haven't been back to the NFC Championship game. They haven't been back to the Super Bowl. So Pete is at a crossroads in terms of how do I want to play? And I think his post-season, like his post-game comments after the loss to the Rams in the playoffs, I think they were telling. He talked about we have to get these teams out of cover 2. As much as he wants to let Russ cook, it is detrimental to the team because the big plays aren't there, and it also exposes the defense to more snaps. I think they have to figure out the way to play. Bringing over the new offensive coordinator from the Rams is a way because they want to be a run-oriented team, but they want to have some of the sex appeal that satisfies Russell Wilson. That may be able to happen with this new offense that they're putting in.
Okay, from a scout's perspective, LeBron came out the other day and said, listen, in 2011 we had a lockout. I started working myself into football shape. I absolutely know I could have made the Seahawks. They asked me for a tryout. Tight end is a very unique position. Mo Alley Cox, Jimmy Graham, Antonio Gates. It is not. It's not quarterback. It's not technical like a center or a tackle. It's not cornerback where it's a specific skill of matching up. Big dudes that can run can be taught to play tight end. And I do look at LeBron and I think to myself, he would have made the NFL, right? Like he would have been a nice player in the NFL.
Oh, he'd been more than a nice player. I mean, Colin, you named off those names. Jimmy Graham, Antonio Gates. I mean, let's throw Tony Gonzalez in there. I got another one, Julian Thomas. All those guys went to Pro Bowls, and they were just, I would say, average basketball players. And LeBron James, you're talking about a top 5 basketball player who was an all-state wide receiver in high school. He would have been 26 years of age at the time when he would have entered the league. He absolutely not only would have made a team, I would have bet on the fact that he would have been a star player. You don't see guys that size, that stature, that can come over the middle, that has some experience. Would it have happened right away? Probably not. But in time, there's no way I would have bet against LeBron James not being able to be a dominant player on the gridiron based on what he did in high school, based on his physical dimensions, and what we know about his work ethic and his winning pedigree.
You like this time of the year, right? This is for you. This is fertile ground for you, and all this movement and stuff. Were you a fan when you were in the front office? You know, you work all year, all this scouting, and then your team goes out and gives up draft picks, and you're probably sitting there thinking, "Well, what did I scout all year for?" How do you view? You get Carson Wentz, and you got to give up first-round picks for Deshaun Watson. As a scout, would that drive you nuts?
No, I probably come from a different standpoint because I'm players over picks. I'm about a proven commodity over what could be behind door number 1, number 2, or number 3. So if I have an opportunity to get a blue chip player in his prime, I am more than willing to pull the trigger on that. We have seen what Jalen Ramsey was able to give the LA Rams when he came over. Great player in his prime. He played at that level. We've seen others be able to come over and do those things. So for me, yeah, I skew towards give me what I know to be true, someone that I've seen do it in an apples-to-apples comparison in the pros, as opposed to apples and oranges. Can this college player project? Will he play in the right system? I like proven players. So, yeah, I'm a little more on the player-friendly standpoint as opposed to the draft picks. There's a method to the madness, but yeah, I want good players.
By the way, we know Carson Wentz is going to fetch some picks. What would you do with a Sam Darnold? who regressed last year. What is his value, in your opinion, as a former scout on the market today?
You know, it's funny because I hear people talk about first-round pick, but to me, I think he is somewhere in the second round. Yeah. I think he brings back a second-round pick. I just don't know how you can justify with his numbers and performance and production a first-round pick, because with that first-round pick, what you're saying is I'm getting a true starter, someone that's going to compete. I'm going to hit on it 75% of the time. I just don't know. I think Sam Darnold can be a good player, but based on what he's done during the league, it's hard for me to say absolutely I'm going to give up a first-round pick. Second rounder, I'll make the deal.
Former NFL defensive back and scout, now Fox Sports NFL analyst, our friend Bucky Brooks. Good seeing you, partner. Nice having you on again.
Hey, thanks so much, Colin.
By the way, he has a podcast that's very good with Daniel Jeremiah, and I Move the Sticks, I think it's called. Is that right? Look at that. See? That switch never goes off up there. Just information always just flying out of there.
Be sure to catch live editions of The Herd weekdays at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific on Fox Sports Radio, FS1, and the iHeart Radio app.
Hey Zreen, what's a TV moment that you're still not over?
I'm still not over the musical episode on Grey's Anatomy.
Me too. I'm cringing just thinking about it. And there are so many of these pop culture moments that we had no choice but to make a podcast about it. Hi, I'm Becky Kirsch.
And I'm Zreen Sneaky. We've been working at Pop Sugar for the better part of a decade, covering events, interviewing celebrities, and spending too much time analyzing the latest in entertainment.
Listen to Not Over It on the iHeart Radio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Joy Taylor with the news.
No. Turn on the news. This is the Herdline News.
Well, Matt Ryan is expected to be back as the Falcons quarterback next season, mostly because he is extremely expensive. But the team is still going to look at other options for that position down the line. GM Terry Fontenot said, you always bring in quarterbacks. You need to bring in quarterbacks, whether it's in the draft, whether it's in free agency, or signing guys off the street. It's so important. It's about having the right 53, but we have to add competition at every position, so we're not going to be afraid to add strengths. I don't know that I completely agree with that. You don't always have to add a quarterback. If you have, say, Aaron Rodgers, you don't have to add Jordan Love. You could get, another starter with that draft position. But when you have Matt Ryan, who has struggled a lot, and he's owed $40+ million in the cap hit this year, and you have the number 4 overall pick, I do think that you should consider taking a quarterback, because you are likely going to move off of Matt Ryan in the coming years, and you want somebody who can come in and sit behind someone like Matt Ryan, learn a little bit. He's probably not going to start this year, but who knows? You really don't know what's going to happen if you bring in somebody in the first round, and there's injuries and all kinds of things. So we saw what happened with Justin Herbert this year. Obviously, I think Matt Ryan is a little more secure than the situation that was in place with Justin Herbert, Tyrod Taylor injury. But my point is, in this situation, yes, I do think that the Falcons should draft a quarterback, but I don't think that applies blanketly to every single team.
Yeah, it's interesting because Atlanta's got their offense isn't the problem. I can see Matt Ryan sitting there going, guys, if you watched us play, we're scoring 28 a Sunday. They've got so many defensive issues. And I do think Arthur Smith, whether he works long term, I don't know, but Matt finally gets an offensive guy. So I actually think you could have an Aaron Rodgers situation where you draft Justin Fields, but then Matt gets this offensive coach like Rodgers did, and his numbers go up, and everybody goes, well, why'd you draft a quarterback? I could make the compelling argument that Matt's numbers for 2 years, we're getting 4 to 5 new quarterbacks in the league every year, plus you can acquire guys, that Atlanta really needs to get defensive players. It's not like they can't score. So I think Atlanta's in a situation, you could make an argument, and I would totally buy both. Their offense will be better now with Arthur Smith. They can't stop anybody in a very smartly quarterback division, and they need help on. I don't always have to have conviction on every argument. You can argue Atlanta needs picks in defense, and if you look at their scores last year, that's a reasonable argument.
You can, but in Bucky Brooks and Daniel Jeremiah's Move the Sticks podcast, they have a saying, confetti guy. Do you think that Matt Ryan is a confetti guy? Could you see him at the end of the year holding up the Lombardi Trophy as the confetti falls on his head? I don't. We've seen Matt Ryan in a Super Bowl and how that went. Now, obviously, Tom Brady was on the other side, but, that's the question. Yes, you're right. They do need a lot of defensive pieces, but you also do have a new head coach this year. You are moving into a new era, assuming they're going to move off Matt Ryan despite his production. I think it's kind of reached the end of the road with Matt Ryan here. We just know he's not going anywhere because it's $40 million, and who's taking Matt Ryan at $40 million?
Right.
No one. So I think that's the bigger question there. So the 49ers have been looking at other options at quarterback and could move off of Jimmy Garoppolo this year, but Tiki Barber thinks San Francisco would be making a big mistake if they do that.
To make him a guy who's going to put the team on his shoulders, and all of a sudden we're stagnant, and we're going to, let's get in this hurry-up offense, and I'm going to dime the ball across the field, make these great throws, and lift us and make our, less than, Pro Bowl players better. I don't see that in him. With all that being said, I think it would be a mistake for the 49ers to flippantly move on with him and try to replace him with someone else, because I don't think that replacement is easily found.
Also, does Kyle Shanahan want to develop a quarterback? I mean, that division is just, Matt Stafford makes the Rams probably slightly better. The Seahawks are at least good. Arizona showed a little life. Kyler had a much better second year. I don't want to go in with, and their draft pick is like, what is it, Joy, like 13th or something? So you're getting the 4th or 5th quarterback. Like, I'm not going to do that in that division. There's just too many good coaches.
They have the 12th pick, but Jimmy G is never available.
I know.
Yes, but he is injured all the time. He's missed 23 games due to injury as a 49er. That's crazy. That is significant. So, yes, when Jimmy G is physically out there, they are capable. They were one throw away from winning the Super Bowl. I like Jimmy G, but availability is a skill, and he is mostly unavailable. And that's got to be frustrating to the point where, obviously, they are very openly looking for a solution there. But I don't know that Kyle Shanahan would be against making some moves and trying to develop a quarterback, because if he's not there, if he can't play, if he's not on the field, you're not better off. You're running with backup. So are you better off trying to develop a quarterback and you have someone for the future and maybe you hit and he's cheap but available, or do you run it back with Jimmy G, who may or may not ever even get on the field? He's injured a lot. So we just talked about this with Bucky Brooks. LeBron James had the opportunity to make the jump to the NFL in 2011. The NBA went into a lockout that year, and he said he was invited to try out for the Cowboys and the Seahawks. He hadn't played football since his junior year of high school, but he was still confident in his abilities. He told The Athletic, I would have made the team. I would have tried out, but I would have made the team. I just know what I'm capable of doing on the football field, especially at that age. So to your point earlier, this is going to drive people that hate LeBron James totally crazy. But I was thinking myself, there was a moment in time where I was very upset with LeBron James for leaving my Miami Heat and going back to Cleveland, and how I'm not in that space anymore. I've grown. He's with the Lakers now. I can enjoy LeBron James and all his greatness. But how would I have thought in that moment? And I think that a lot of people are critical of LeBron James in one aspect of his game, which is why they would push back on the idea that he could make it in the NFL. And that is LeBron may or may not sell some fouls every once in a while.
Sure.
Might exaggerate with a few flops. And that doesn't work in the NFL. The NFL, you actually get hit. Full collision sport.
Right.
And the NBA is a contact sport. The idea that the NBA is all finesse and there's no physicality to it, you're talking about 7-foot-tall, 250-pound men. You go run up against them and try and score a basket. You're going to end up on your back and very injured. It's very much a contact sport, but it's not a collision sport. So I think that's the part that people would be resistant to. But LeBron played football in high school, so it's not like he doesn't know the feeling of what it's like to be tackled. Obviously not by NFL players, but it's not like he never played football.
Listen, Travis Kelce doesn't like to block. Jimmy Graham mostly refused to block. Ali Mocox. I mean, if you look at the NFL, if you carry 3 to 4 tight ends, everybody's got a bad blocking tight end. And LeBron would not be, he would not be a George Kittle or a Gronk. That's not what kind of player he would be. He would be an incredible vertical threat. He would not be your best blocking tight end. But remember, LeBron, if you look at his career, there's been thin LeBron, there's been heavier LeBron, And, he's one of these guys that spends 7 figures a year in his body. And there's no doubt in my mind that LeBron would spend $1.5 million years. He'd get up to about 267, 266. He'd probably run a little slower 40, but you tell me in the red zone, LeBron fades to the corner. There's nothing, and we know he can jump. There's just nobody in the NFL that can defend him. Nobody.
No one.
I wish. Sometime, I've seen most everything I want to in sports. LeBron at the NFL would have been a treat, but I'll never get to say. I'll say that. Enjoy with the news.
Well, that's the news.
And thanks for stopping by.
The Herd Line News.
Anthony Davis of the Lakers out for some time, could be up to a month. Thoughts on Steph Curry, who's playing his best basketball in forever. Chris Broussard joins me next.
Be sure to catch live editions of The Herd weekdays at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific.
Hey, I'm Gabrielle Collins, period drama nerd, and your behind-the-scenes guide to Bridgerton. On Bridgerton, the official podcast, we're learning how this fantasy world dipped in history came to life.
Daphne, her costume design really is about the elegance of simplicity.
And we got 2 scenic artists in who painted the backings for us by hand.
These dukes are all like in their late 20s, early 30s. Almost all of them are unmarried, really good looking, and none of them have syphilis.
Can you imagine when he looks into your eyes and then he dips you?
We just heard this sort of ripping sound. Yep, I think there's just been a wardrobe malfunction.
Listen to Bridgerton, the official podcast, on Thursdays starting February 18th on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere you get your favorite shows.
Chris Broussard covers the NBA for Fox Sports, formerly New York Times. Cavs beat writer for years, also does The Odd Couple with Rob Parker. Very funny, sticky show, easy to listen to, and he's joining us now live during the East Coast storms. I'm going to bounce a few things around for you. First of all, are you surprised Embiid and Simmons are working together? I don't like the chemistry. I've watched them this year. I still don't love it, but they're winning. They are winning. Tobias Harris looks better than he's looked in a couple years. What do you make of Philadelphia? Do you buy him?
Well, this is what I've said actually for probably 2 years, Colin, is that Brett Brown was fine, but get a new coach and give him a chance to work with Embiid and Simmons and see what he can do. And look, you may be looking at what happened last night without Embiid and Simmons goes wild, and they lost to Utah, but that was they played well. There's no shame in losing on the road to Utah, but this is working. This is working well. If I'm Philadelphia, I am happy with what Doc Rivers has done. He's gotten Embiid to go down low a little more. Look, I still would like to see Embiid down there a bit more, but he's playing as well as anybody in the league. His mid-range jump shot has become phenomenal. I think, Colin, he could end up surpassing Patrick Ewing as the best jump shooting center, like true center, not a stretch five, in the history of the league, the way he's shooting right now. I like them a lot in the East. I still have Brooklyn ahead of them, but I think Brooklyn and Philly are the 2 best teams in the East, and it's working. So I would not mess with it right now. They added shooting around those 2 guys. Doc's done a good job there.
Let's talk about the Nets. Listen, I think Harden and KD are good enough to win the East if you gave them some wing defenders. I just think with Kyrie and Harden, you're going to be in a lot of fun, wildly entertaining 136, 132 games, but that doesn't feel like championship stuff to me. How long do you think they stick with this sort of 3-headed offensive basketball monster?
Well, you said, look, Durant's the best player and Harden's the second best player. Now, Kyrie is a top 15 player in the league, so he's phenomenal too. But Harden and Durant are the 2 best. And I think KD and either of those 2, like before they got Harden, I think they were a legitimate contender. So I feel you on that. But I think they can get to the finals. And I think if they get to the finals, obviously that means they're playing well, and they could give the Lakers or the Clippers, whoever comes out of the West, major trouble. Look, offensively, it's been great. I said when they first teamed up, I said ideally what'll happen is Harden is the point guard, Kyrie is the 2, and Durant does his thing in the front court. I wasn't sure if Kyrie would accept that fully, but he has, obviously, and it's smart because Harden might be the best point guard in the league. I mean, like a point guard. He's still going to give you 20-plus points, but the way he runs the offense, the way he passes the ball, he is excellent. And I'm glad for him he's getting to show his whole game because a lot of people thought he was a ball hog and just a scorer. But look, their only question is defense because on offense, they can get an open shot every single trip down the floor. You can't really say that about any other team in the league. Every time down the floor, because of those 3 guys, Joe Harris or DeAndre Jordan or whoever else is out there or one of the big stars will get an open shot if they work for it. So I think they're great. All they have to do is get the defense together and play more games together with the big 3 so they develop chemistry. They're a real threat. Make no mistake about it.
AD will be back in 2 or 3 weeks. Let's talk Lakers when AD was healthy. They were on a long winning streak. Now, the games were ugly. They were winning narrowly. They fell behind 22-2 the other night and still won. Do you see any warts, or did you believe this new Laker team, which is younger, was better than last year's title team?
Yeah, that's a great question. Before the season, I was saying definitely. Now, I think they do miss some rim protection that they had with JaVale McGee and Dwight Howard. And Marc Gasol, just doesn't have a ton left. You can see that. But Schroeder's playing well. He's playing well. And obviously, Montrez is fit in. So, yeah, I think they were the favorites to win it when they are healthy. Here's what I'd like to see, though, Colin, while AD is out. And he's going to miss at least these 9 games, it looks like, before the All-Star break. Obviously, he's got to get right physically. But I think he needs to take a mental inventory as well of where he was. Because I expected him to become, get in the MVP conversation this year. Come off that championship with more swagger, more confidence, a natural passing of the torch from LeBron to AD as the top player on the Lakers, and it just hasn't happened. AD's scoring is down, his rebounding is down. Oddly, his foul shooting is down. Not just number of attempts, but he's a career 80% shooter, shooting 71%. And the numbers, I like him defensively. I think he's been great, but for some reason the numbers say the Lakers have been better without him on the floor defensively. So I want him, maybe it's been because he's been banged up physically all year and playing through, some soreness, but he's got to think, what is going on with me? I got to get, my game face on during the regular season and display the same type of drive that LeBron is showing in the regular season so AD can become that MVP caliber player. That's what they're going to need from him to win the championship this year.
All right, we're up against it. Chris Broussard, you see him on First Things First in the morning. Fox Sports, he's our NBA guy. Good stuff. It is always a pleasure to see you, Chris. Good luck enduring that rugged East Coast winter. I'm glad it's you, not me. Thanks.
Thanks, Colin. Great to see you, buddy.
All right. Odd Couple with Rob Parker. Very funny radio show. Improve your diet, improve your life with delicious, high-quality protein delivered to your door. Go to butcherbox.com/HERD. 2 New York strips, pack of bacon free in your first box. butcherbox.com/HERD. Anthony Davis. That's what's interesting about Anthony. He was not having a good year. His offensive numbers were all down. Now, some of it is the break, and his body has to heal. But I'd say this. The bubble last year, those guys didn't have to be on flights. They got a 3-month in-season break, and they didn't have to be on flights. So, I'm not saying the bubble wasn't challenging, but you can't use it as an excuse. AD was not playing well before he got hurt. We'll see you tomorrow. It's The Herd.
Want more Herd? The Herd streams 24 hours a day, 7 days a week within the iHeartRadio app. Search Herd to listen live or on demand whenever you like.